Hello, and welcome to the session on Identity Governance, Software as a Service, and Introduction to the Cloud Bridge. Of course, organizations today desire all of the advantages and conveniences of a software as a service solution. However, when consuming software as a service, they still require all the features and capabilities of an on-premises offering. And of course, identity governance is no different. Hybrid environments are, of course, always a reality as well. Even though organizations have a SaaS-first strategy, there's still many applications that are running within the data center of the organization and require the same identity management and governance that they have been used to for all of these years on-prem. Those challenges when looking for a SaaS solution are sometimes answered by the file transfer of identity and application information from the on-prem data center to the SaaS service, or instantiating a site-to-site VPN, or setting up complex firewall rules. Of course, each one of those aren't necessarily the best solution. While they do work, they lack the ability for a completely integrated solution, as well as reducing a lot of the complexities that would be expected when consuming software as a service. To answer to that challenge, when Micro Focus introduced Identity Governance as a Service, we did two things. First, we started out with an integration of a complete identity and access management platform. So when authenticating, you have the option of using our advanced authentication SaaS service, but most importantly is the introduction of what we refer to as the Cloud Bridge. And that Cloud Bridge allows for integration from an on-prem identity management solution that you have today, specifically Identity Manager, and the on-prem application identity and application sources. Of course, as we continue to grow the identity and access management platform, Access Manager and Privileged Access Management will also come online over the course of the next several months. Let's take a few minutes and talk specifically about what the Cloud Bridge is. The Cloud Bridge is basically a Docker container that provides secure communication between the data center and the Identity Governance or IAM service. There's minimal configuration, so it's a simple container that you deploy on-prem, and working with our SaaS Center of Excellence team, they will help you configure the Docker container or the Cloud Bridge to securely communicate and provide that single conduit of communication between your data center or data centers with the SaaS service. So if we were to walk through the way organizations or customers today, especially identity manager customers or current identity manager customers, are consuming identity governance as a service, let's walk through that with what is offered today. The advantages is it leverages existing on-premises identity manager deployment. So today, you may have an identity manager driver from an HR source like Workday or SAP or PeopleSoft, and you have all of that configuration to manage identity lifecycle into your on-prem identity manager. So when consuming Identity Governance SaaS and deploying the Cloud Bridge, this allows for the integration of all of the existing investment that you've made with Identity Manager on-prem by sending identities from an HR source into Identity Manager through the Cloud Bridge up to Identity Governance SaaS. Now, there's two methodologies that are provided today. There's the Identity Gateway Integration module, or there is eDirectory or Identity Vault Collection that's available to you. Of course, the Identity Gateway Integration module is preferable because that provides you real-time identity update from the on-prem Identity Manager up to the SaaS service. The next component is the collection of on-premises and SaaS applications. Of course, if you're collecting from a SaaS application such as Salesforce.com, you can easily do that directly from SaaS service to the Identity Governance service. Or from an on-prem application, that can simply be done and use that configuration through the Cloud Bridge to collect that data. The nice thing is that the collection looks very similar to an identity governance collection from our on-prem offering. So the only difference is when you look at Identity Governance SaaS, there's now 2 additional options. I'm blowing this up here for you so that you can see that basically when you configure the collector, it gives you the option that says use the cloud bridge, yes or no, and then select the cloud bridge data source configuration. So basically, if you wanted to, this will provide you with all the capabilities of doing all collection that you know today, but be able to collect that information through the cloud bridge. Now, those of you that are familiar with Identity Manager, this looks a lot like and has a similar configuration to any Identity Manager driver utilizing the remote loader service. In our April release, we are actually integrating now to be able to communicate back down to an on-premises Identity Manager to invoke provisioning actions. So this is our first phase of delivering Identity Manager integration and ultimately to our journey of full Identity Manager SaaS. So as we talked before, you have the ability to send information, identity information from an on-prem Identity Manager up through the cloud bridge to Identity Governance SaaS, where the processes run to determine who should get access to what. Once that is made, either through identity lifecycle or things like request and approval or certification campaigns, the results of any of that processing can now be returned back to Identity Manager on-prem so that you can leverage all of the existing value that you have developed over the course of the years with your on-prem Identity Manager. So that basically flows from Identity Governance SaaS back down through the cloud bridge, again, a secure conduit of communication to Identity Manager, and then ultimately to provision to an on-prem application or back to provision to a SaaS application. This is done through 2 methods. You can use what's referred to as the eDirectory or LDAP fulfiller, which that will update attributes on an on-premise Identity Manager deployment. And that can, of course, be used in a multitude of ways. You could use a loopback driver. You could add the person to a member of an Identity Manager role, or you could simply just change an attribute, make the user a member of a group, etc. And any of those types of events that would happen in IDM on-prem would invoke a driver to complete the transaction to either grant or remove that permission from the user. The second option that you have is what's known as the workflow fulfiller. And the workflow fulfiller will allow you to initiate a workflow action. If you're an Advanced Edition customer, you can initiate that workflow action onto an on-premise Identity Manager. That workflow can then, of course, invoke driver action to occur, which would ultimately result in provisioning the user to an on-prem application, or adding that person or provisioning or deprovisioning that person to a SaaS application. So as you can see, the advantages is you have your existing on-prem Identity Manager. You not only get to leverage that investment that you've made, but you get to extend the value significantly simply because adding Identity Governance SaaS and deploying the cloud bridge. Now, ultimately, for customers who want to go to an all SaaS solution, where you would remove Identity Manager on-prem, or for a new customer to have full Identity Manager or IGA as a service, in our September release coming up later this year, we will introduce the option for Identity Manager SaaS. And Identity Manager SaaS will, again, let's walk through the process where you can now collect information from an on-prem Identity Manager up to IG SaaS. Same processes occur as far as being able to initiate action based upon an identity lifecycle event, a request and approval action, or things such as a certification campaign or a micro-certification. However, instead of going back down, all the way back down to an Identity Manager on-prem to initiate the action, now you will be able to do fulfillment directly from Identity Governance SaaS and provision from Identity Governance SaaS to a SaaS source. And that basically brings capabilities of Identity Manager directly or cloud native so that you can run a full SaaS service. And then if you wanted to provision directly to an on-prem application, that of course again would go back down through the cloud bridge and directly from the cloud bridge to an on-premise application. So you can think of the cloud bridge, of course, as I said earlier, it has the same configuration from a collector perspective as a remote loader. You'll have that same functionality brought to you as in the cloud bridge, so that now the identity manager driver or the cloud bridge will actually act as a remote loader that you're familiar with a traditional IDM on-prem. So this continues to advance our strategy of delivering not only identity governance as a SaaS, but full identity governance and administration as a service. I want to close out with a few comments on our identity governance as a service and our roadmap as it relates to our SaaS offerings. We do realize that that multiple customers have the desire to continue to run IGA as an on-premise offering, or as our traditional on-premise offering, as well as some customers which wish to migrate to a SaaS offering. Our commitment is that we will deliver IGA on-prem and via SaaS with complete feature parity, so that you do not have to make that choice with compromise. You can decide if you want to run Identity Manager and Identity Governance on-prem and have all the features and capabilities that provides to you, then that is certainly your option. If you want to move to a complete SaaS offering, you will not have to compromise and give up any of the features that you have today with the SaaS service. And again, all of the new features that we bring to on-prem, we will deliver to SaaS, and all the new features that we deliver to SaaS, we will bring them on-prem. So there's, as an example, there are some new features that we deployed with Identity Governance SaaS when it first launched late in the latter part of last year. Those will be coming on-prem or have been delivered to our on-prem customers in the form of Service Pack for Identity Governance. So this just goes to reemphasize our commitment to deliver the same IGA capabilities regardless of the environment that your organization chooses. We also want to make sure that our customers understand that we are going to leverage and extend your investment that you've made over the years in Identity Manager and Identity Governance. Some customers who have been with us for 20 years have a lot of investment in driver policy that they've created over the years. And we are going to extend and reuse that policy as a customer migrates from an on-prem implementation to a SaaS implementation. So it's not a rip and replace. It is a reuse and an extend, giving you not only the ability to leverage the existing investment, but have all of the advantages of leveraging that investment to get incremental value out of that. In addition to that, and lastly, for our customers that wish to move from an on-prem deployment to a SaaS offering, we will deliver a migration strategy to move your on-premises Identity Manager and on-premises Identity Governance to an IGA as a service. Examples of that is to be able to extract all of the policies that you've developed on-prem and then simply import those into the SaaS offering so that you have a very easy migration. And we do deliver that migration strategy so that you can move to a SaaS service as you desire. So the Cloud Bridge is a very important component to us in order to keep this flexible deployment option for SaaS on-premises or a hybrid environment, and allow your organization to leverage IGA in whatever way that you deem appropriate. So I want to thank you for joining this session with us, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us.